Hey everyone, this is Jackson Glass from Hollywood, California. Today I just want to talk to you guys about how to make a killer drum loop, and I'm just going to give some quick, simple tips on how you can improve your drum loops. So first we're going to listen to this drum loop that I made a couple minutes before, real quick. Alright, now I'm going to break down what I've done for you guys because it's real easy to do this and make good quality drum loops quickly if you know some cool tricks. First off is my kick, which is plain. I've done nothing special. You'll see that I put the volume at 0 and I put the voices to 1 in Ableton because that saves CPU power, and you always want your signal chain to be as loud as possible until you get to the very end. So at the very end you want to turn it down here on the fader, but you want it to be as loud as possible through all the effects you might have. On this particular kick I didn't need to do any EQing, compression, limiting, any of that. Sometimes it helps to do those things, but I have good quality kick sample right here. Sounds great on its own. So I did not feel the need to do anything more than just that. Let's see here. On the loop, I did it real cheap and fast. There's nothing wrong with that if it gets the job done. I just looped right here, just one beat. Made it a little shorter than the whole thing because when you throw it on the arrangement window, it actually helps, I find. Whoops. Because then when you make it longer, you can see all the individual kicks, whereas it just looks like one black line if you don't make a little gap right there. So let's see. Then we have the snare. Okay. So what I've done with the snare, done a couple things here. First thing I did was I raised it 2 pitches. I'll show it to you without that. Okay, the reason I did that is because if you look at our kick, I have a spectrum analyzer right here. You can see that our kick is hitting at a G sharp. Or actually, yeah, G sharp. So what I wanted to do was make sure the snare was in tune with that. So if you look at the snare is hitting at a G. That's right, so is the kick. My bad. Let's look at that again. Make sure I'm right. Yeah, so the kick is hitting at a G, and the snare I saw was hitting on an F. So that was clashing a little bit, so I raised it up 2, so they would both be hitting on a G together. It sounds more together that way. So you can hear it if I lower it. Now, it doesn't always help to tune your drums this way, but I find that a lot of the times it's better than not tuning them. Although sometimes it sounds good if you just leave them how they are. It really just depends on your particular samples you're using. The other thing I did on the snare was I just rolled off the lows below 120, which is pretty normal. A lot of times if you check out your spectrum analyzer, you can see where it's hitting. Right here it's hitting around the 200 mark, which is pretty normal. And you can boost it up a little bit around the 200 mark if you feel like it, if it sounds good. I don't always do that, but a lot of people like to do that. It's up to you and your particular samples you're using. Then let's see here, I have the hi-hat. Oh, one last thing, I'm sorry, that I did on the snare was that if you look on the snare sample right here, you can see it hits at multiple places. And so I played around with the track delay right here, and I moved it back 9 milliseconds because it sounded better that way. Now if I took this off, it doesn't sound as good. It gives a lot more of a thwack if you actually let it hit before the kick. And the very last thing I did was, if you zoom in here, I moved it back just slightly from the beat. And then right here, I moved it ahead just slightly. I mean, it's so faint that you might not even notice it, but these little things you do, they add up. They keep your ear interested, and those things, if you do a lot of them over your whole track, it's really good for your production quality. All right, hi-hat. Okay, so here I have the main beat, which is very simple. Just a regular beat, but what I've done is I've added, first of all, a groove. right here from my groove library. A real simple swing for an MPC kit. Added a little bit of randomness, 3%, not a lot, but it's one of those things that over time it builds up. You really don't want a ton of randomness because that's not really how real drummers play. They don't play very randomly, but a tiny bit of it is good, I find. The other thing I did was added these 2 notes right here. These really faint ones with the low velocity are called ghost notes, and they give your loop a lot of groove and swing that you can't get any other way. So I just cranked the velocity right here up to 40, and then on the pattern I made these super low. I think these are at 4. Yeah, but if I took them out, you notice a huge difference. Put them back in. So they're super quiet, but they add a lot of groove and funk and shuffle to your track. I highly recommend using ghost notes. Use them on snares too. Works really well for them. Then all I did was I rolled off the lows. Around 200 is where I found it to be good, but anywhere between 1 and 300 usually generally sounds good for hi-hats. You want to make sure that it's not too thin or metallic sounding. All right, next up is my first percussion. Okay, all I did here was, it's 1 note, I added the groove in that I made for the hi-hats, and then added a bit of randomness to the panning, which I love doing, especially on one-shots or things that don't hit very often in the loop. So right here it's panning 10 randomly, which means it can go as far as 5 left to 5 right in the loop. It's great because it keeps your ear interested. It's not stagnant. The sound doesn't sit still. The other thing I did, let's solve this by itself, is I rolled off the lows and the highs, as you can see here. Now the reason I chose 213 and around 8,000 is because if you listen to it and throw it on a spectrum analyzer, that's where I saw it was starting to roll off on its own. So I just helped the roll off more, and it makes it sound a lot more connected with the loop. Or I'll show you with and without it. It just sounds better. It saves a lot of space and room for other things. You don't really want all frequencies to be blasting all the time. If you don't need them, turn them off.